Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters.
And
And,
okay,
and
so,
we're still, and this is the winter solstice today,
oh,
right?
that's right. And it's going to
So
start getting lighter by a minute every day, starting tomorrow.
the
That's
length
what
of
I, that's what
day,
I
yeah,
heard. Yeah, that
yeah.
really, I'm looking forward to that. Light is so important, you know.
I,
I no,
I
I do
agree.
miss the sun. I mean, because I get up late because I don't have a job to go to, and I just like, oh my God, I better get out before 4 o'clock. you know.
Yeah,
Mm.
no,
I
it's
do
true.
other things, but I don't have a paying job. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way. All right. Okay.
So we were talking about some of the things from, a city council
Ele-
related thing,
Right.
and there were really several things that may be worth mentioning. And we could also review a little bit about the whole term or the last year too, by the way.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
many things, it's been such a difficult 2 years that
Mm.
sometimes you sort of lose track of time of what has happened or has not happened during
Yeah.
the
Mostly it's been
time.
during the pandemic. I mean, it happened in March of 2020. I mean, Sumble became mayor in January of 2020. So she's been the pandemic mayor.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I suspect she would like to be the mayor who will
If it ain't broke, don't fix
do a
it or whatever
second
that.
term
Yeah.
and hopefully emerge from the
Mhm.
pandemic as mayor.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
she probably has some supporters who would be okay with that. So
Yeah.
we'll
No,
see what
I
happens
think
on January 3rd at
is
10
that the
a.m.
date? And is it now going to be Zoom only? Have you seen
Nobody
any?
has said, basically the plan was to have the inaugural on Monday, January 3rd, 10
Okay.
a.m. And they're
Just
always
family
very
only?
punctual about this. It's actually in
Yeah.
state law. It must be at 10 a.m.
Wow. Okay.
And it was supposed to be in person, but only for invited
Family.
guests, typically family
Okay.
and such, right?
I guess they could
Um,
still do that.
yeah, and they could do that. Maybe they will.
I
But
mean, Tim Toomey had, although there would be a lot more people than there were
yeah,
last night. So,
but it's certainly not out of the question that there may be a change of plans between now and then.
uh-huh.
But I suspect they will still try to do it in person,
But it will be Zoomed.
or it'll be
The
Zoom
difference, it'll
because
be Zoom because then everybody else
somebody
can
like
watch it.
me will
Yeah.
be persona non grata in the Sullivan Chamber.
Well, what if
And
a
I've always
counselor
like,
invited you?
I suppose, but honestly, I think
You don't want to be around that many people,
I
Robert.
don't want
I
to.
wouldn't want to be around that many
No, I
people.
respect the desire to keep the population
Yeah.
down,
Yeah.
I'm not going to force my way
Right.
into that.
I think it should just be their family. That's my.
Yeah, I think so. So, and then later in the day, I believe it's 6 p.m. is the inauguration of the school committee, which
So there's no city council meeting that night? No, it's
no,
January 10th.
no,
That's right.
the
Yeah.
city
Okay.
council meeting is the inaugural
January 10th.
meeting. And
Oh,
the
I see.
inaugural
Okay.
meeting is they basically do 2 items of business.
At the
Well,
10 a.m. one?
yeah, at the 10 a.m. Item meeting, the
Yeah.
inaugural,
Yeah.
which is convened by the city clerk as the presiding officer, I might
Okay.
add, because there is no mayor to hold the gavel yet. So the
Oh,
city
right.
clerk is
That's
the
right.
presiding
Yeah.
officer.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and it's all kind of scripted. It's basically you're reading pretty much what state law says you got to read. And
Okay.
then once they've actually sworn everybody in and done all of the raising of hands and placing of
Mhm.
hands on sacred books and such,
Yeah.
then they proceed immediately to the election of the mayor. And I'm pretty sure that'll be, that'll go quick. This is not going to be a 132 ballot mayoral year, I don't
I see.
believe.
Do
And
they
then
pick the vice mayor also?
yes, and then they move on to the election of the vice chair of the city council. Technically,
Oh,
under
that's what
state
they're
law, there
called,
is no
vice
such
chair,
thing as a vice
the
mayor.
vice mayor. So why do
That's
we
just
say that?
we just do it because it makes people feel better, I guess. But it doesn't. There's nowhere in the law that
I
says there
mean,
is such a
in
thing.
many ways, I think that it should be the chairman of the city council or chairperson rather than mayor. Mayor's a
May,
confusing term because
in
it's,
except for
yeah,
the role of that a mayor assumes as chair of the school committee under the
right.
planning
And that's a
charter.
chair. Yeah.
The mayor, in terms of the relationship with the city council, is effectively the city council president and is elected in much the same way as it's done in
All right. So maybe
Boston.
they should be called president of the city council.
It could be, but it's a tradition, and
I know.
it's like
But
Fiddler on
but
the Roof,
people, but
tradition.
I know, but people come
Yeah.
into the city, they don't know. I mean, they just,
I
oh,
know, I know.
mayor's the
There,
elected mayor. Wow.
Most of the
I mean,
people in
I
the
think
city
it's
say who's
great.
the mayor, they don't even know anyway. So the
Well,
mayor
that's
could be
true,
walking
too.
down the street in Cambridge and most of the people wouldn't even know who it was. And I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way.
Well, those are the people that don't vote. How many people vote out of how many people could vote? We have 119,000 people. That's counting kids. So how many,
Yeah, yeah.
60,
Well, the
70,000
registered voters is
adults?
70K, yeah.
And then we have 22,000 vote.
Yeah, yeah.
That's nothing.
So,
And then 14,000 voted for that. For the
right.
ballot. I mean, that's not a
Right.
mandate.
But the
Sorry. Yeah.
the position of a mayor in Cambridge is not the high profile position like Michelle Wu would
No.
have
Well,
or Marty
it's a
Walsh
whole
has in
different
Boston.
story.
Yeah,
It's a whole different thing.
yeah, and and they are kind of exalted by design, and they
Michelle Wu was president of the city council, though. That's why. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was
no,
Kim
that was Kim
Janey. It was Kim
Janey.
Janey, which
Yeah,
is
and
why she then became mayor. Right.
acting mayor.
Acting
right?
mayor.
Yes,
Excuse me.
yes.
But so
Exactly.
they did have that distinction. Okay.
Right.
So maybe it
Yeah.
makes it whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I mean, there is one important role that the mayor has in addition to being chair of the school committee, which is the mayor makes the appointments of the city council committees. And, so there's
Right.
a certain amount of bargaining that goes on behind the scenes.
Oh, there's a lot that
You'll
the
have
mayor
my
has to
vote, but
do.
I would love to chair the
Oh, yeah.
ordinance committee or,
Okay.
whatever committee, and,
Interesting. So do you
yeah.
think Alana will still be the vice mayor? Or
I have
it
no idea.
different?
I very hard to say.
But
To me,
but
vice mayor is a sort of a non-position anyway.
right, but I'm just saying, who is that a vote or is that an agreement like everything else?
I mean, you do have to
You
elect
put
the
your
vice
name
mayor.
out, you put your name out there that you want it, or
In years past, the way it
Yeah.
worked, and it
Yeah.
may work this way as well this
Okay.
year,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. It
Yeah.
would often be the case that the person who was selected as vice mayor was
Yeah.
a person who played a pivotal role in delivering the votes to elect the mayor. That
Well,
often
how would
happens.
that? But how would they do that? What do you mean pivotal vote? They're voting
Well,
for
if there were
themselves.
if there were 5 votes to put in a mayor, and they all understood amongst the 5 that okay, and this is what we're going to do for vice mayor, then that just
Oh.
happens right next as a matter of course.
Oh,
Like
whatever.
it's
Okay.
understood. Yeah,
All right,
exactly.
whatever.
I mean,
Well, we'll
somebody
find
could
out.
somebody could,
Yeah.
go back on their word, I suppose. But
I see. All right,
yeah,
whatever.
and
Stuff that
some people,
I'm not aware
there's
of.
some people who think that the vice mayor is sort of the mayor in waiting, the person who will be next.
No,
or something.
they're only
And
there
that's
when the mayor
just-
can't be
that's
there. They
never
take
been
over the meeting.
case. Yeah.
No. In
Yeah,
fact,
and
they don't really have any.
and they
real
don't even have to be,
responsibilities.
if the
No.
mayor has to leave the meeting, whatever, if there's, unless it's some emergency, then the person who would assume the chair would be the vice mayor.
Right. That's when the only time I ever see that happening.
Right. But if the mayor had to go, says, mayor could just go to any council and say, could you please take the chair? And that sometimes happens too,
True.
so
But
it's
they
not
can stand
hard to
in
pass.
for I mean, but like at events and stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So anyway, so we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
All right, so that's January 3rd. Okay.
Yeah, and as I say, the school committee's at 6 o'clock. Normally that would happen over at, the media cafeteria or somebody.
But it's going to
But
happen at City Hall, right?
They're actually doing it at Sullivan Chamber. That's what I saw in the schedule, unless somebody misprinted it. But so that's what's
Okay.
supposed to happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So those are some of the things that are sort of coming up. Pretty
Oh,
quick.
boy, oh,
Yeah.
boy, oh, boy. So we're going to have 2 new city councilors, and I think
Right, and
one
and
or 2 new. Is there only one new?
yeah,
school
just one.
committee?
Monica
Just one?
Bowman's out, and
Creedy Bambi or
Bambi is in. Yeah, exactly. It's funny because so many people were trying to do this interpretation of the elections. If, well, the big issues would really turn the tide on this election with this, that, and the other
What?
thing. Honestly, all of that's not nonsense. This was basically incumbents just replaced. Incumbents were pretty much
Or
all
if you
back
spent
in.
a lot of money on advertising. I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, if there was an open seat, then, then there are
Mhm.
certain advantages to try and get the open seat. But basically, Paul Toner will assume Tim
Oh, I was
Toomey.
talking about the school committee. Sorry.
Right. And on the, and really, as, nobody likes to hear these political realities, but
Yeah.
2 years ago, it was actually Burhan Azim presence on a slate of candidates who, when he was defeated, helped provide the votes to put Jiva and Sabrina Wheeler
And
in.
now it's been
And
reversed.
then they just reversed,
Yeah.
and, one pretty new face for another pretty new face.
Pretty young face. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
24,
Burano will
gosh.
be the youngest city councilor ever
Ever.
inaugurated
Unbelievable.
in the city of Cambridge. Yes.
Yeah.
And he's a very polite guy. So,
Yeah.
and my
Very
understanding is
interesting.
he's a pretty cooperative guy too. So,
And
and
hopefully
we could
reasonable.
use that right
Yeah.
now, honestly.
Yeah.
When I think back about this last council term,
Mhm.
especially some of what happens in the,
With the police. Yeah.
right. So the pandemic, as if the pandemic wasn't bad enough, when the murder of George Floyd happened, all hell broke loose all over the place. And really one of the most, and it's great because there should be a reckoning on many, many fronts. But
Yes. Yeah.
boy, did some of the bad blood that developed in
Yeah.
the city council chamber. I mean, I think it was last summer, of 2020, where it was almost a shouting match with Granville
Mhm.
Bard was
I
finally
know.
had enough of one or two city councilors.
Well, he left, didn't he?
And yeah.
We don't. Yeah.
And Denise Simmons went right back at Quentin Zondervan, and kind of put him in his place. And a lot of
Oh,
that.
so did Stumble.
Yes, and
That
Stumble
one
has
has-
done that multiple times actually.
Have
So
you no manners?
have you no manners, right? So there's been this sort of a lingering touch of poison in the water there. And I think, listen, I don't necessarily agree with his politics, but Buron he's a moderating, he's a young kid, but I think he's cooperative, he's respectful, and cordial. And honestly, we could use a little bit more of that. So I think that could be okay. And by the way, I'm not trying to yell at Jeev and Sabrina Wheeler. In many respects, he was very cooperative too. But I think Buron is probably be okay that way. I mean, if they get into some intractable positions in policy differences, we'll see where it goes.
Would you say that Jivan's crowning achievement was the bike safety ordinance? Is he the one that really propelled that? Because it seems that's realizing.
Whether he as an individual, he was, as some people recognize, for those who were supportive of the affordable housing overlay, he provided the 6th vote from where there would have been 5 prior to his arrival. So he wasn't the mover and shaker on that, but he did provide the 6th vote.
No, but I'm talking about the bike safety ordinance.
The bike safety ordinance, there are multiples. It's funny because as I was looking over the last 2 years, which I've done here, I've got basically 9 pages of highlights sitting in front of me here. The bicycle safety ordinance was actually ordained in a previous term,
2017, right?
Right, but then they did these amendments, which
then created these
very rigid schedules, and they added certain streets, and they made it so mandatory that in fact it was, and there are many of us still do not believe this actually is legally
okay, but
correct.
Wait, did that all happen after the pandemic or before?
It had during the pandemic.
See, and that's
I have a problem with that.
Yeah, because people just didn't know what was going on.
Basically my feeling about it, I mean, there are certain things you need to do because you need to do them right away. But things that are highly consequential or potentially very controversial, I don't think it's very wise to push those through in the cover of darkness.
No.
And in some respects,
those were, it's just interesting because that did happen.
Yes.
I mean, chances are a lot of people would have been caught off guard anyway, but this is so.
Well,
look what,
what do they say? You shall reap what you shall have sown.
Yeah.
So the way in which that was pushed through and the way in which was sort of forced to be actually executed.
Can that be amended? Can that be looked at?
It's an ordinance. It could be amended, but the problem is there's a political element to this, and
I think the tides are changing on that.
They may be changing, but I mean, I've said it before. I think that there's still a little bit of the fear that you don't want to be the next Craig Kelly, who basically went against a powerful lobby and then found yourself on the outs.
Yeah, but look at last night's meeting. I started to watch, the public comment. I thought it was going to be all somewhere. It was all kind of look for moderate. They were supporting those two policy orders, which did get charter righted by
Quentin Zonovan, yeah.
which maybe makes sense because the meeting would have gone to 1 a.m. probably. But but it was maybe there were, I counted maybe 9 people that were very pro bike and stuff. So I'm curious about that. I mean, I think that they're going to have to start listening. These are business owners and people that have lived here for years. These are people that are not just going to be here for a few years or just.
But there is a kind of I don't know, a pretty sad political reality right now, which is that if you've been here for a long time, and if you're above a certain age, it's sort of like there's a lot of people now who are voting now who basically are the okay boomer mindset.
Right. Oh, you're going to be gone. I mean, who cares?
Yeah,
like we are the new. We are it now.
So they see
with
this
the program.
This is a schism, and this is just some sort of a dying class of people. That
is true. I mean, there's definitely a demographic
there is I think
take on this, because you could hear it in the voices. You could hear, except for some people that were, they're just sort of like old hippies, and they don't own cars or whatever. And that's all fine. It's just that they don't represent. I think they're now hearing from that middle part of Cambridge that we talked about this, that we don't hear much from.
I've been following this stuff for long enough now that I can tell you that once upon a time, if there was any very loud complaint about public process in Cambridge, is that we would process everything to death.
To death, right.
So that if somebody had an idea, then it would take forever to get anything done, because everybody was trying so hard to listen to all points of view and to find consensus and compromise. That was the tradition. In the last few years, the degree to which people are perfectly happy to run right over the opposition, we may have different points of view on the affordable housing overlay, but there were some perfectly reasonable amendments that were being offered during that, and then they were just pretty much just crammed right down. We will not tolerate dissent. And the bicycle safety ordinance amendments, as they were put forward principally by McGovern and Sabrina Wheeler, I believe, were the chief.
McGovern put forth those?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's whose name was on it,
That's
but
true. Well,
but they weren't the only ones, right?
Yeah, no.
But they were playing to a particular audience, and the notion that that there may be some people who disagree. And by the way, many of the people you're hearing right now in great, very loud disagreement had no idea any of this happened. I know.
That's what I'm saying. Those are the middle that don't pay attention to all these meetings, and unless you're have a hardcore issue, you're not paying attention to this stuff.
Whether correct or not, there are a lot of people who treat me like I'm this archivist resource of, so I have received more than a few requests from people,
really,
including some of the people you heard in public comment who said, could you tell me when they actually did that amendment and who voted for it and who sponsored it? They didn't know. I mean, it's obvious that they're asking me about things, and it's, by the way, it's on my website too. They could find it easily enough, but they didn't know. They didn't know it then. They didn't know it until basically the Steins started popping up. You could argue, well, they should have known. That's just doesn't fly for me.
One of these public commenters, his name was George, and he was very against the policy. And then at the end, he said he really supports Jevon's, Sabrina Wheeler. That's where I got he really pushed this. And then at the end, he said, I live in Somerville.
I know the guy you're talking about.
Oh, really? Oh, geez.
Yeah. So
anyway,
right. Anyway, it's a pretty broken politic. I wonder sometimes how we get out of this, because honestly, not that I was ever a great fan of processing things to death, but if you give me a choice between basically the sort of the ram it through and just torpedo the opposition mindset that we seem to be in right now, versus process it to death and maybe you get half a loaf rather than a whole loaf, I will take the old way. Absolutely, I prefer the old way.
Which is process it to death.
I'd rather process it some, and and if it takes longer to get something done, but everybody would be okay with it to some degree.
Does that segue into the campaign finance ordinance that got?
Yeah. So we should probably mention that. So that's something that actually was introduced. Well, it was really introduced back in 2014 or 15.
Oh yeah, I know. Carlone keeps
Dennis Carlone and Nadine Mazin were sort of big proponents of and there were different iterations of
public financing, all this stuff.
Yeah, the latest version of a campaign finance limits proposal actually dates to about 14 months ago in October of 2020.
Right.
And you could argue, well, right in the midst of the pandemic, but honestly, we were a lot less fearful. The pandemic felt like it was a little lifting then,
True. Yeah.
But so I think that was just basically the realization of a campaign that Dennis Carlone has been basically pushing for a long time. And we got
to stop.
There was no hidden agenda about this. This is something that he had his supporters.
Or anybody having any business before the council. Who's going to investigate all that?
Yeah. So I think what they did this past time is they basically lifted the language from an ordinance that Somerville had passed a couple of years ago.
But they did
modified it.
Yeah,
they basically were putting in other restrictions, which made it a little more iffy as to whether you could just do it by a straight ordinance. And that's what the city solicitor said.
Right.
But, it's not at all clear. Actually, you didn't have to read too much between the lines of Nancy Glow, the city solicitor, basically saying that she had some serious doubts that Somerville's ordinance was legal. And that but
it's been around for many years and it hasn't been challenged.
It's not been many years, but it hasn't been challenged. And as they say,
no one takes developer money.
No whistle, no foul, right?
Yeah, right.
And as long as everybody was willing to abide by it, you can call it an ordinance, or you can call it, sort of a moral authority statement, or whatever. But people have been abiding by it, and and if somebody went over the limit, they've been giving donations back.
That's right.
So it's sort of working. Now, if somebody wants to challenge it, maybe they could challenge it and throw it out. But I'll bet you people would still abide by it in Somerville because it's becoming a bit of a tradition.
It only applies to upzoning, but McGovern's point about downzoning and petitions that come before the council and those people that might give money to counselors that support their positions. How is that had influence?
I got to say though, Councilor McGovern is the person who took the most money by far from those sources.
I know, but even so what was it, $10,000?
And I love her to death, but Denise Simmons comes in a close second. And
I know, but again, it's $12,000, $15,000.
Listen, I am not of the opinion that there's a whole lot of influence buying going on here.
Not for that.
And to me, I wasn't in favor of this ordinance because of, and it's what is the ordinance? Basically, they're putting a limit of $200 from
on real estate developer, anyone having business before the city.
Right. There are going to be a few people, like if you happen to be a lawyer who happens to have done work.
Well, is that an affiliate? Didn't they get rid of the affiliate language, or did they not?
But let me tell you, there are a lot of lawyers working for Goulston stores who are basically working hand in hand with developers who are contributing $500 to $1,000 to quite a few counselors this time around. So, so anyway, I just
where do you draw the line? Yeah, but I think
I don't know that you really can. So that's why for me, if they passed it, they ordained it, they got 7 votes to ordain it in the end. There was a last minute attempt to derail it. I think Vice Mayor Mallon basically put in an amendment to basically say this will only go into effect after a home rule petition is approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. And that amendment failed on a 4 to 5 vote. And then they said, oh, well, okay. And I'm absolutely certain that amendment was in there, not just because it was the advice of the city solicitor, because they knew that there's a good likelihood that the home rule amendment would not be approved. And this was a nice, polite way of not having this go into effect.
Yeah.
All right. But in the end, that didn't happen. So it went through, it had the votes. It's now an ordinance, and we'll see how it plays out. Will somebody challenge it? Probably not, actually. In my opinion, probably not.
Why?
Because if you actually look at the amount of money coming from developers in the last few years.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't
been
seem
dropping.
to amount to that much.
it's a lot less than it used to be.
Yeah.
You know,
But
and,
also
yeah,
the percentage of what people are taking, so it's 20%. I don't see that as a big deal when I see other people giving themselves, $15,000.
well, actually, the way I look at it this way is, I mean, it's funny, these like two-edged things. If you're a candidate who's been running on your purity, and I wouldn't take a dirty dollar from anybody, and now nobody's allowed to, you can't run on that anymore because nobody's allowed to take out money, right? Okay, so you've just lost your campaign.
Well, who's to say what money is dirt? Where do these people giving $1,000 donations? They probably have portfolios, and I'm not criticizing. I have stuff that's got probably oil in it and stuff. I'm not pure.
I know. Listen,
are we going to start looking at their portfolios to see? Wait a minute, we took $1,000, but where's your money coming from?
I think that's fundamentally
insane.
what
I know.
I don't know that the city solicitor explicitly expressed those concerns, but I think you could kind of read it anyway.
But that's really, where do you draw the line? Money is money. Anyone owning property, anyone owning
there's so
a
much gray
portfolio,
area here.
Either you go live off the grid or not.
And who's going to adjudicate this?
Well, exactly.
Is the city clerk going to do it? Is the Board of Election Commissioners going to decide who's dirty money and who isn't?
Let's let's clog up the
I'm all for
right.
maximal disclosure. And if people want to vote for somebody who's taking money from this source or that source, let them do it.
You know what it is? It's just that $10,000 or that 12 or whatever they take, they just won't take it. So you know what? We're still going to raise money other places.
The money will come. The money will come. There's enough money around.
It's a lot to do about nothing, and this whole thing about perception that it's give me a break. I don't have that perception. I don't know who these people are,
but for some, listen,
I know they spoke at public comment. You got to pass
matters to some voters.
I know some voters.
That's right. So now
the ones that they hear from a lot. I guess.
Now those voters will have to use some other criteria for deciding who they think is wonderful.
Right. Well, let's just keep track of all these donations.
I do it all the time.
I know. Let's just see. I'm going to start looking up their stock portfolio.
Anyway, I think we're just about out of time. But
we are. Okay.
We'll be back in the new year. See you there.
All right.
Cambridge
Oh my
InsideOut.
God, I ranted away.